Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all out tonight. My name is Miranda Massie, and I direct the Climate Museum. I'm here with Chai Vasarhelyi, the Oscar-winning director of the beautiful film you just saw. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming out tonight. It means a lot.
It's wonderful to be here with everyone, and huge thanks to Nat Geo and Film at Lincoln Center for making this event possible. We have a very brief time to speak with each other and then with you, and then we're going to make a call to action of all of you. So I'm going to dive right into it. Tell us what drew you into making this film and what you'd like people to take from it. I understand that you and your partner, Jimmy, have been looking at archival footage and thinking about this movie for years now.
No, it's a good question. And before I go there, I just want to thank the producer of this film, Anna Barnes, is in the room. Anna, please wave. Anna also runs our company, and so we're very grateful for Anna. No, I mean, this one was a tricky one. And I think all of our films are kind of tricky ones where, I mean, personally, I kind of dread making a movie in general. I dread a lot of things, but I especially dread making movies because you know the commitment that is required. And I also know how like obsessive and I don't know, whatever, ambitious Jimmy and I both are, that if we commit, it becomes like a thing. Like you can't let it go until it's ready. And this one was hard because Yvonne and Doug and Chris were Jimmy's, essential mentors. Like, and for me as a city person who married into this, it was kind of like a losing battle. Like I was, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Either they were going to be mad, he was going to be mad, everyone was going to be mad. And also we had, I know the type of films we make and I know the kind of the standards that we expect from ourselves. So it was like, it couldn't be a softball, So it really happened that we were thinking about it, looking at it, flirting with it. And I just like, no. Until I began to see. So we have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, and some of our kids' peers, parents are here, classmates are here. When I began to see through my daughter, who's the elder, he's the 9-year-old's eyes, about how scared she is about climate change, and because I think from kind of my generation, I'm 44, it's like it still seems like a big thing, even though it's happening, and for them, she was like viscerally scared, and what really struck me about the story was that it's about putting one foot in front of the other. Right. It's about the things that one can do, even when it seems insurmountable. And then additionally, as a woman, and as I was always really taken by Chris's story of kind of regeneration, that you can find the love of your life in your late 40s. You can embrace this amazing career and then realize in your 40s that if you stay there, that's the end of your life and you maybe want more. And how scary that is, walking away from being the CEO of Patagonia, and then meeting this man who everyone's like, he's like a notorious sandbagger, he's like an asshole, all these things, but they fell madly in love. And then additionally, what is a sandbagger is what you just asked. So it's a good question. I've been educated on this. It's not necessarily from the Manhattan vernacular. Apparently, it literally means like when you put rocks or sand and heavy objects in somebody else's backpack. So you're sandbagging them, meaning it's also like, oh, I climbed this mountain. How was it? Oh, it was fine. So then the next person who goes is like, oh, it's just fine. It's not the worst thing that'll ever happen to me, but it ends up being the most difficult thing you've ever done. So it's kind of like the understatement or this idea of like kind of, yeah, you don't play up the difficulty of something and then someone else walks into it. But I was just really moved by Chris. And then additionally, like when the worst happened to her, like she had spent 25 of her happiest years with this man and he dies, and she really wanted to go with him. And the fact that and that's what I saw in first person, is that when I saw Chris pick herself up, I was like, okay, this is a film we have to make,
I love that. That's beautiful. And speaking of love, the tagline is "Love is a force of nature." I watch this film and I see many intersecting love stories in addition to the central love story. Do you see other love stories as well? Can you talk about how the love stories in the film relate one to the other?
I mean, yes, that was what was, I don't know, the question with all these films is like maybe they're trying to tackle a bigger question or, you know, an issue that we're facing, but how do you start to care for them? And, you know, and personally for me, I have to care through the characters. I'm not a mountain climber. You know, I'm happy to walk, 3 miles on New York City blocks, but like once you start going vertically, like it's not really, I'm not interested. Very happily so. You know, like I'm perfectly secure in that. But I just was, I was really moved by this group of friends who loved each other and who, like Yvonne said the other day, he's like, you're born naked and you die naked. Why do I need $3 billion? And that's why he donated the Patagonia company to charity and to climate, to the environment. So I think it's like love, and it's a very, very personal love. Like their love is something that I would only hope that I feel that strongly about Jimmy when I'm 65.
We won't tell him.
Sorry. But I know he'll feel that way about me. So we should all tweet that right now and say #JimmyChin. You're going to love your wife forever, no matter what she says in public. Anyway, but it was also just this commitment, this idea of, I will give everything in my commitment to my intention to try to help something. And it's okay if there are moments that are really, really hard. It's okay, it's okay if there's criticism. But if your intention is there, that, and putting in the work, which really is what it is. It's the work. And so that's kind of, and I really do hope that my, romantic and creative partner and I feel this way about each other at that age, because that's a really beautiful thing.
A spectacular thing. What was most surprising to you and Jimmy making this film?
Okay, so I have an X-rated answer, which is I was incredibly surprised about the sexuality between them and the eroticism and how they really did write each other once a day and were madly in love into their 60s, 70s, and that was something I'd really never thought about, if that makes sense. My parents have never kissed in front of me in my whole life. And it was but that was exciting, looking at these people who are older and who found that passion. I think the other surprising element for me was I didn't realize in the beginning how it was ultimately these two women who did something, in that they face so much criticism, which is very, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, Chile, Argentina, they're extractive economies. They made most of their money from the mines in the north, and suddenly, once Doug died, it was an opportunity because there was a female president, President Bachelet, and this outpouring for a widow, and the colonial question was kind of less of an issue because Doug decided to be buried there, and they weren't going anywhere. And it was the idea that this was women's work. These two women met and saw something they could do and did it. And that, I didn't realize when we were first getting involved that this would be that type of story.
Right, it's more a band of brothers story at the beginning, right?
Generally, most outdoor things are.
Hence the preference for Manhattan blocks.
Yes.
What, if anything, did you have to leave on the cutting room floor that still nags at the back of your mind?
So this is a tough question for me because ever since I made my first film, and I know exactly what I left on the cutting room floor, and I swore to God I'll never be bullied again, and all these things, we left something quite profound on this cutting room floor, which was there is an amazing anecdote about there was going to be, the Chilean government proposed this clear cut. It was going to be the longest clear cut in the world, which means cutting down wild lands to facilitate the building of a dam in Patagonia that would send the electricity up to the north to power the mines. And Doug, this was probably, what Chris would call his greatest marketing, campaign ever. And Doug was a marketer. That's his special sauce, his genius. And he asked the most prominent Chilean model to participate in these billboards, which he paid for, where they kind of disfigured her face and said, how would you feel, with, to scar your most beautiful resource. And there was this logo of Patagonia San Represas, which is without fences, essentially. And what was so special about this campaign is that, this land, as you can see, is incredibly rugged. It's incredibly remote. You have to to get to Parque Patagonia. It's a 6.5 hour kind of horrible drive. I did it with my 3-year-old at the time, and I was I think she's going to lose a tooth or something because it's so bumpy. It's really that bad. And so it was just a remote place for Chileans, and they didn't really know about it. And somehow, this particular campaign brought the idea of Patagonia to life. And I would say, we could credit Doug with that. And so we did not include the story because it messed up the film. If it happened later than most of the events of the film, and it was this huge kind of, I don't know, detour that I would have loved to take, but we couldn't. That's kind of what you do. You make a film and you make these hard decisions. But I have regrets. This was a really special story. And mostly because really when he died, there was an indigenous woman there who puts up her hand in the at the funeral being Patagonia without fences. And it was this movement that everyone ended up joining. They're people on horseback, just began marching together. And so, I don't know what to do with it, but yes, it gives me great pain. And it would have, I don't know, it's a wonderful, wonderful anecdote.
Well, we're very lucky to have heard it from you. Thank you for sharing it.
I'm sure someone could say it better. But yes.
No, that's a lovely story.
Yeah, so I thought that the film was great. It was just so eye-opening. I'm from Latin America, actually, and so it was very special for me to, I don't know, I think it's very weird to see things like this in third world countries because there are so many other problems that people are worrying about that you kind of lose some of them in the way. And I wanted to ask you what do you think is the social and cultural environment in places like Chile, Argentina, the rest of South America and Central America, of how, the culture, the lack of education, the poverty kind of prohibits more development and a more open mind in people and stuff like that.
No, I think this is the fundamental question, right? And I think that that's actually kind of what was unique about the story is that they had this idea. They didn't think it through that well in the beginning, and then they committed to it. But I'm a Brazilian national. My dad is Hungarian, but he grew up in Brazil. And I've spent, many, many summers of my life with my grandma in Brazil. And I don't think one outweighs the other. I think that they're incredibly important, pressing social, economic, health questions. And we could talk about, we've got them here too. It's just that I think there's been the idea of the environment is so big, it's really hard to understand, yet we're seeing the poorest communities on earth being affected by it most, right? And I admire that this couple and this group of friends had this conviction to do what they could. They weren't doctors. They're not Patagonia has tried to address the issues of food and the sustainable fishing, et cetera. But it's and they were the first company to have daycare, for the people who worked at Patagonia, for all the women. And that was Yvonne's wife, Melinda, who insisted when they started the company in the, in the 70s. But it's not either or. The question is more, what can you do? What can I do? What is the particular skill I have that I can lend to this? I can make movies, right? But there should be a lot of movies made about inequality. And, right now I'm most kind of concerned about the decline of the Catholic Church in Brazil and the rise of fundamentalism, because it's a big deal.
And in case somebody couldn't hear that, what was the hardest part about making the film? What was the biggest challenge?
So the fun thing about making a film is that it's like a puzzle, right? And so the constraints, like the problems, actually become the opportunities where you can do something new that you've never tried before. And, I would say that like the biggest like narrative problem, well, one, I'd never made a film about someone I'd never met before. And I never met Doug Tompkins. And normally, like, it's a documentary, so like my truth factor, like everything, like I know that if I always say it's like the mirror question. If I look in the mirror and I know we're right, then that I know I'm solid. But I'd never met the guy, So that was, I had to take it from I had to learn about him through other people. And then additionally, the most dramatic thing that happens is that he died and no one filmed it. And, how do you bring that to life? So one, the death, like using that painterly quality to conjure it along with the first person accounts, which means when someone's telling you about what they experienced, I think really solved a problem. But I think the scariest thing was when I understood that this film should be about Chris. So that means that Doug's death needs to come in the beginning, because that liberated us to tell the story we were most interested in, and also a story that I think matters in a more like here and now way. So, but it's a good question. But like my main thing about nonfiction is the constraints are always there. Like you missed filming it. It has to be real. Like, you can't write it. But the constraints always create an opportunity. It's a really good question. How did we film the underwater? So, this is something the first time we ever did this was in a film called The Rescue. I don't know how many people have seen it. It's about the Thai cave. Yeah, thank you. One of my favorite films ever. And basically they're called reenactments, and some documentary filmmakers do this a lot. It kind of wasn't something I was used to doing. And so basically what we did for the death was that there was this iPhone footage and like those live photos. Like I still don't know how to like still a live photo, but it's a live photo. Like it happens. And so we were using these like mishmash of live photos. We also used like images of the river that were not shot in the same day. And then, we could use 3 kayaks, and it's in the spirit of what happened, but it wasn't the day it happened. And so the same thing is we shot underwater, some like impressionistic. We recreated it, but it's less literal. It's just more moments, like the way memory would work. Like if I were telling the story and I experienced it, I would remember the hand that's older. I would remember the paddle slipping. And so we shot those types of things, then use this painterly quality to indicate that it's not real. It's about memory, but it's true to the memory. So, it's a really good question.
And before we go to the reception,
we've got to do our thing.
We're going to do our thing, because this is a film about making a commitment and taking action. Yeah. So if we can get the call to action screen up, please. I'm going to give you a couple data points that will help explain what we're going to ask you to do. In the United States, there's a huge bipartisan supermajority that wants to see a Green New Deal and other very aggressive action on climate. But we all underestimate that support literally by half. This is a recently discovered fact of our social lives. So, for example, in New York State, 72% of people want to see super aggressive climate action. New Yorkers will tell you that it's in the low 40s. In Mississippi, 61% want to see transformational climate action. That's the same level of support as we have for reproductive freedom, which we view as landslide bipartisan support. So there is a landslide level, bipartisan level of support for transformational climate action in the United States. We all think we're outnumbered and in the minority, and it's too big to tackle, and we can't do it. So what we're gonna ask you all to do is to use that flow code to post about this myth of American climate indifference on social media. It should be pretty self-explanatory once you get through the flow code. One last thing, I'm so sorry. This again will seem strange to people who are unfamiliar with the Climate Museum, but you will quickly love it. We're gonna do 3 claps in unison. and I'm going to crowdsource them. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3. We're going to clap on what would otherwise be the fourth beat. And let me ask, what's the first thing we're clapping for?
Climate action.
Great. Climate action. Ready? So 1, 2, 3. Second thing we're clapping for?
Chris Tompkins.
Chris Tompkins. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to steal the last one. I want to clap for Chai, Film at Lincoln Center, and Jimmy in this beautiful film.
For love.
1, 2, 3 for love.